Manever I say ma PENDREAM TV. PENDREAM TV there, osia dem yopo.
Back to talk time, and as I indicated, we are going to be discussing the power supply situation in the country now. We will make a journey into the past and make projections for the future. But today, we are particularly privileged to have with us one who knows his stuff. But we are going to be talking to a gentleman who has been Minister of Power before and currently is the Member of Parliament for Pru East, Dr. Kwabena Donkor. Sir, you're welcome to the studio.
Thank you, sir.
There are reports all over the country of unreliable power supply. What do you think is happening?
Essentially, we are shedding power. And unfortunately, the managers of the sector, aided by the regulators, are unable to be truthful with us. On the 12th, for example, on the 12th of March, we were shedding 600 megawatts at peak and over 200 megawatts at off-peak. This is from the Systems Control Center. So we've been shedding power for the last couple of weeks, if not longer. And unfortunately, for the people running the sector and for government, PR, Ghanaians don't need to be told we are in load shedding. You don't, senior, you don't need anyone to tell you that your lights are on when they are off. So, what Ghanaians are asking for is a timetable, something to guide us, so that when you are leaving the house, over the weekend, you will know how to make the preparations that you need to mitigate the effects of the load shedding. That is what we're asking for.
But why are we shedding the load in the first instance?
Largely because we have inadequate fuel supply. Largely because we have inadequate fuel supply, and load shedding is not a question of capacity today. It is a question of fuel supply. We have reasonable capacity, and I say reasonable because on some days we operate within the reserve margin in terms of available capacity. But the issue really for today is fuel. We have domestic gas, but our domestic gas is inadequate.
Please carry on. Don't worry at all.
Okay.
No, you can take your phone.
No. Our domestic gas is inadequate to meet our requirements.
Yeah. Please carry on.
Our domestic gas is inadequate to meet our requirements, and so it is important that we import some gas. We import gas from Nigeria. And then even in the context of our domestic gas, our gas assets are in the Western Corridor, and half of our generating assets are in the Eastern Corridor. So gas has to be carried from the west to the east. Unfortunately, West African Gas Pipeline was designed for flow from the east to the west. So we have to do a reverse flow on it. And the reverse flow costs money. The West African Gas Line Company charges us for the reverse flow function. And so that is the other challenge we have, because we don't have the liquidity to buy adequate gas from Nigeria or to pay for what we have consumed. We don't also have the liquidity to pay timeously for the services rendered by the West African Gas Company in terms of the reverse flow.
So, when do you project that all of this is going to end? Is it ever going to end?
Yes and no. Yes, it will end when we confront the situation. when we stop playing around with the situation, when we stop burying our heads in the sand and confront that, look, essentially the power sector has a financial challenge. And how do we deal with it? The power sector is under recovering cost. And when any entity, you run a business here, if you are under recovering cost, you will hit the wall at some point. We are under recovering cost. The cost of operation is higher than the revenue it generates as of today. And that also has a number of ramifications in that we then have a liquidity challenge.
Why is the cost of recovery so low? Why are we not recovering what we put into power generation? Especially given the fact that many people are complaining that the cost of electricity is too high.
The cost of electricity may be high in terms of our average incomes. If we look at it that way, yes. And that is also partly because the real economy is not growing. The Ghanaian economy in the last couple of years has only grown in nominal terms. In real terms, the economy has not grown much. That is one. Two, the macroeconomic management has left much to be desired. Most of the payables of the power sector are dollar denominated. The receivables are CD denominated. And when we so mismanage the macroeconomy, that today the dollar is equivalent to 13 cedis, then we have a challenge. Remember, in 2016, it was less than 4 cedis to a dollar. Today, we are $13. So the ripple effect of macroeconomic mismanagement, the ripple effect of poor fiscal and monetary policy impacts on the energy sector. Indeed, a former Minister of Energy, Dr. Joe Otiaje, now Professor Otiaje, once said the energy sector does not have an energy problem, have a financial problem. So inadequate funding and financing is really at the bottom of our liquidity challenge. It was for this reason that the past government, when we had to engage the Millennium Challenge Corporation under the compact, agreed that the biggest challenge we have was the distribution sector, because the distribution sector was subsector was undercapitalized. Recently, the ECG managing director talked about having 600 or more of near obsolete overloaded transformers, of course, out of over 32,000. So it should be put in perspective. But the challenge then is, this challenge was seen. And it was for this reason that for over about $500 million was to be injected into the concession. Unfortunately, arising out of greed, we botched even the concessionaire arrangement. And so when you are running a business, and ECG in particular, in fact, both ECG and NETCO are limited liability companies by Act 992. If you are running a business as you do, and you are undercapitalized, you are bleeding, and you need capital injection, the shareholder has the obligation to re-inject capital. That we are not doing.
Because we simply don't have. We are broke.
We are, and
the country is bankrupt.
And part of the reason we are broke is that we set wrong priorities. I sincerely believe that we are not as broke as we put out. If we have money for a national cathedral, when we have over 50 cathedrals already in the country, not built by the state, by civil society, religious bodies? What is our business having a national cathedral? Part of the reason we are broke is also that decisions in this country are largely procurement driven and never efficiency driven. Once there is procurement and whatever arises out of procurement, we are okay. We move on to looking for the next procurement opportunity. We don't run businesses as businesses. And again, as I've stated before, and I've been lambasted for that, we are also intellectually lazy as a people. And therefore, we don't think through our decisions. If you take some of our policies, they are engineered for political outcomes, not managerial and sustainable outcomes. We want free this. We don't think through. We don't even cost what that free thing is going to cost. And where the resources, which are the other sacrifices we have to make, the choice we have to make for that free thing we so desire to be implemented. And so until I am one person who agrees with ECG that anybody consuming power must pay for it. And I was quite excited when Parliament, power to Parliament was cut off.
We will come to that. But for now, we're going to go on a short break. And when we come back, Dr. Kwabena Donkor, to tell us about the problem with the independent power producers, because they've been threatening, over the last couple of months, maybe over a year, and so on. So what is the problem with them when we come back from break? Short break. Hello and welcome back to Talk Time, and we have in the studio Dr. Kwabena Donkor, Member of Parliament for Pru East and former Minister of Power. Now, so we've been hearing of threats from the independent power producers. They've been threatening to shut down their plant. What is the problem?
Well, we have a problem with payment. Once ECG is not collecting enough, then there is a difficulty in meeting our commitments, in paying them timeously. When they threaten, we run around, we find some money, we pay part of the arrears. Meanwhile, we are accumulating current debt. So that is a challenge. And it's a challenge partly because, as I stated earlier, we have not managed our monetary policy well. When you don't manage your monetary and fiscal policies well, you fall into the trap of a depreciating currency. Dear payables, we pay them in dollars. Period. At the time some of the contracts were signed, we didn't have much of a challenge paying because the revenue, the exchange rate was about good. But once your exchange rate deteriorates, you cannot, in a society where average incomes, real incomes have been really static, there's a level to which you can impose additional price burden on consumers. So there is disequilibrium between receivables and payables. Does the state step in? And if the state is to step in, it will have to forego some other expenditure. This conversation we have not had. Again, if you look at our utilities, let's take ECG and Netco. They are the two distribution companies we have. They unfortunately have not been efficient in their operations. when you have about 30% loss, technical and commercial, you buy the product, and before you sell the product, you already have a 30% loss. No margin on pricing can make up for that loss. Because on the average, you don't mark up cost by 30% or more to break even. So there is also that challenge. We will really, going forward, our entities will have to place a high priority on efficiency, managerial and financial efficiency, internal cost reduction, cutting of waste, prioritizing of expenditure, and getting more from the resources we have than we are doing.
But sir, from your knowledge and perhaps experience, can the independent power producers continue to function? Or is there a point where they can no longer produce?
If you take typical project finance, 30% equity, 70% debt, you're going to borrow. That is often the best ratio, 30% equity, 70% debt. So there is a debt of 70%. You have to finance that debt. You finance that debt from the proceeds. So if you are not being paid, that undermines your ability to even finance your debt. So pressure is also on them. And even for companies such as Sanu Asogli, which are semi-state owned, because they are owned by regional governments, etc. Even them, there is the need for a return on investment. So that is their challenge. And then, of course, we also have the challenge of monitoring. Are they charging us what they actually produce? Because even in terms of capacity charge, the plant must be available and ready to dispatch. Are we really certain? Do we have adequate mechanisms in place to be sure that we are not overbuilt? I'm not saying they are doing that, but these are things that we must go in for a place priority on. Cost containment, better financial management of these entities, and the Ghanaian state also playing its role. If you take the lifeline, 0 to 30 kilowatt hours, which is the lifeline, it comes at a cost. Have we actually costed how much the lifeline is? And if the lifeline is a needed social intervention policy, it's a safety net for the vulnerable, and every society worth its salt must have these safety nets. But it has to be costed, and it has to be paid for. Who pays for that? Do we have a line item in our national budget to take care of this critical social policy? Because we have run these entities as are buying their state-owned, these critical business practices have been absent. But the Ghanaian state decided to register ECG as a company. We could have registered it as a corporation. We could have registered it as an authority. But we decided to register as a company. And the company's code, therefore, applies. And yet, again, part of the paradox is that we have Jubilee House appointing MDs. We have Jubilee House appointing directors, etc. And yet, we say they are companies. That in itself is wrong. Under the Companies Act, Act 992, an annual general meeting is what appoints directors. And the board appoints the chief executive. So, right from the word go, there is more emphasis on patronage than business efficiency and running this. And these are multi-million-dollar businesses. Can we run them as perks for the boys? So the Ghanaian state, and I mean the Ghanaian state, must take a second look. Is this the way we want to move forward in the 21st century? I believe no. We must take management, financial management, business management seriously. If it's a vehicle for social welfare, for social intervention, let's say so. Let's cost it, and then let's put that on as a line item on the national budget. Then we know that, yes, if it's free SHS, how much does it cost the nation state? And he said, properly costed. We are not going to do try and error. We cost it. And
but so you're not painting a very nice picture for the future. It's gloomy.
No, the future, senior, will be gloomy until we change the way we do things. We cannot do the same things and expect different outcomes, senior. If you take free SHS, for example, let me digress for a minute. Where in the world, and I've been to a few countries in my lifetime, is secondary education free to the boarding level? Go to the Scandinavian countries. Go to the best of the social democratic countries. The boarding component is not part of it. Yes, tuition is free. Probably you have subsidized transport to school. But not boarding. So, if I had the opportunity, say, okay, let's do means testing. Because of our structural rigidities, the good schools happen to be in certain areas and everybody must have access by means testing. If we have 100,000 scholarships for children of people below a certain financial line, they have these scholarships. And because they are scholarships, they are paid for. We don't do free for all when the millionaire's child goes to school, go to the boarding house for free. So the same applies in the energy sector. For example, one of the topical issues, ECG is threatening hospitals. When I heard it, I said, this is exciting. It will force us to think. If you take Kolebu, Kolebu is a whole township. And if I was making a recommendation to ECG or to the state, I would say, first of all, put the theaters, put the wards, put the blood bank, put the laboratories, put all of them on postpaid. The rest of Kolebu put on prepaid. The administration block, the houses, whatever else, put that. And then let's prioritize the payment of electricity from our IGF. Kolebu's IGF is bigger than the budgets of 2-3 ministries combined, some of the ministries. So, in terms of priority, the theater, the wards, the laboratories, the blood banks, the very critical services, they are on postpaid. Every month, that becomes the first item of payment that we pay. The rest of Kolebu is on prepaid, whether it's the administration block. And when I was Minister of Power, I put the Ministry of Energy on prepaid. So if you don't go and buy power, so that is the approach. Yes, we must recognize critical areas, But not the whole hospital is critical.
Now, sir, we're going to go on a short break. And again, when we come back, we're going to be talking about installed capacity and what that actually means. Installed capacity, excess capacity as well. There's been a lot of arguments around that. And we would like to understand it, especially in relation to the current power outages that we are suffering. So, short break. Welcome back to Talk Time, and we are engaged in a conversation with Dr. Kwabena Donkor, Member of Parliament for Pru East and former Minister of Power. So at the time you left office, I mean your government left office, and immediately thereafter, there were all kinds of discussions about the capacity, installed capacity, and so on. Why did the issue of capacity become so important in the public discourse on electricity supply?
Thank you, Senior. The question of capacity, whether installed capacity, dependable capacity, excess capacity, has been over-politicized. You hardly have real energy people talking about excess capacity. Senior, the Akosombo Dam has an installed capacity of 1,020 megawatts. At no point do you operate the dam at 1,020 megawatts. In good seasons, when the reservoir is healthy, you operate between 700, maximum 900. So that then becomes the dependable capacity. If you take a number of power plants, they are rated at a certain level, but you don't run the plant at that maximum level. So the normal level you run the plant at is what we call dependable capacity. So if you use installed capacity as the basis of analysis, you will be exaggerating the capacity available. Pondam has a capacity of 160 megawatts. Bui has an installed capacity of 400 megawatts. However, and again, this is the dynamic, Pond's 160 megawatts is bigger than Bui's 400 megawatts.
How is that?
Yes. It is because Bui was designed as a peaking plant to be run during peak. Pond was designed to run 24 hours. So in terms of monthly, annual generation, the 160 running 24 hours a day, 7 days in a week, is bigger than the 400 that comes on during peak demand. If you run Bui 24 hours, the reservoir will dry up in about 3 months, 4 months. So if you just add numbers and true numbers at us, as this is the installed capacity, without appreciating what the numbers mean, and unfortunately that has been done. Then again, we have the challenge. In some jurisdictions, we have what we call the reserve margin. In some jurisdictions, it's 20%. In Ghana, in fact, I know there's 25%. In Ghana, we have chosen 18%. The Energy Commission uses 18%. That is capacity beyond your daily demand that you must have. because you are dealing with equipment. A plant may go off, a plant may go down for planned maintenance, for unplanned maintenance, etc. So you must have that capacity to rely on when these normal operational turns happen. Beyond that, we are a developing country. Indeed, this country, the youth unemployment, and indeed today it's gone beyond youth unemployment. The unemployment situation will only improve if we increase manufacturing, if we put a lot more emphasis on industrialization. To do that, you need power. To do that, you will need investment, whether indigenous or external inflows. It takes 3 years to construct a thermal plant. If somebody comes to, I want to set up a steel plant in Ghana, are we going to tell the person that wait for 3 years, we will have, how much power do you need? In 3 years, we'll have that power for you? No. We have our presidents, past and present, globe-trotting, looking for investment. And therefore, in addition to the reserve margin, which is needed just to run, keep the status quo running, you also need what I call a development reserve. Some power that will be available that you will leverage to attract investment.
Now, sir.
And so, when you have political apparatchiks, for obvious short-term political reasons, they lump all this together and say you have excess capacity. That really is not strategic thinking. Yes, there's a challenge. Somebody must pay for this reserve that you will need to pull down. The question really is, how do we pay for this reserve? Must it be the consumer or the Ghanaian state or a mixture? That is the discussion that we have. And if it's the Ghanaian state, then there should be a budget line in the national budget that we are paying for this development reserve that we need.
Anyway, sir, we're going to go for another short break. And when we come back, I'd like to pose another question. In the face of all of this, power curtailment and so on, what should we do now in order to provide some comfort for the consuming public? Short break. Welcome back to Talk Time, and we are in conversation with Dr. Kwabena Donkor, of course, former Minister of Power, and now Member of Parliament for Pru East.
Outgoing member.
Yeah, but Member of Parliament still.
Yes.
Anyway, sir, so what do we do? The lights are going off. People are complaining. Industry is suffering. Everything is suffering. What do we do?
In the short term, we must find the money to buy the fuel. Period. We must cut some other expenditure. It must start with the utilities. They must prioritize. Look, a number of them are busy putting up office build complexes, costing millions of dollars. Is this the time? No. The Ghanaian state itself is to a large extent engaged in some frivolous expenditure that is not critical to our well-being. We must curtail that and push all that money to be up to date with our payment on gas supply. That is the short term. In the medium term, we should start placing a lot more emphasis on cost control, efficiency gains in the energy sector, and also managing the CD, the macroeconomy well, so we have a stable exchange regime. Of course, there is the renewable space. The renewable space offers some potential, but I am quick to say only some potential. If you take solar, in terms of the national grid, there's only so much we can put on the national grid because of solar variability. In 2015, there was this solar farm at Mankwazi producing 20 megawatts. I went on a visit with my officials. Whilst on the solar farm, they were generating about 80 megawatts, and there was a cloud cover. Generation dropped suddenly to 4 megawatts. So, but fortunately, storage technology is gradually beginning to improve. The question with solar, the major question with solar is storage. How do you store? And for those of you in private businesses, you know how expensive initial cost can be. But if you're able to store, then it can even out over 24 hours. When the sun is no longer there, the stored power will be utilized. Then it becomes cost effective. So for base load, solar is still not yet there. So we should be exploring other options, geothermal. Unfortunately for us, in terms of wind energy, we are not very endowed.
What about what was contained in the 7-year development plan of Nkrumah, the mini hydro projects? Have we abandoned them?
Our mini hydro potential in the era of climate change has its serious dangers as well. In fact, the ideal thing is to have cascading dams, but we have been unable to even control the quality of our water bodies. With all the lead in our water bodies, you can imagine what they would do on our turbines. And with climate change, when we go into one of Nkrumah's major ideas, which we must look at, this is the time for it, is nuclear power. Nuclear provides stable base load power at the cheapest possible cost.
But then they say it's dangerous.
Chief, what in life is danger-free? We've had a nuclear facility in this country since Nkrumah's days. It's a small reactor, but it's been there. We've been able to manage it since Nkrumah's day. It's not for power generation, and it's a small experimental reactor. But I believe we have the capacity to manage it. We have managed other dangers.
Well, sir, thank you very much for coming to the studio. We are most grateful to you for giving us some enlightenment on the current power crisis. And we do hope that you may find the time to come back again and to explain things to us. Thank you so very much. And on behalf of our viewers and everybody here, we'd like to say a big thank you to you. And for you viewers, as we always say, the best is on Pan-African television. So please keep your dial on Pan-African television until we meet again. Goodbye from all of us from Pan-African television. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, Senior.
Mamena PENDREAM TV ase. Now so far so good. Say open online portal e wo Ghana. Nipa share, nipa follow, nipa comment here. To my best of knowledge, without any biases, PENDREAM TV.